Welcome. We are ready to start our Jumpstart series. And just a reminder, there's one prerequisite course for starting this Jumpstart series, and that is going to be to view the Global Health Supply Chain Maturity Model session. So please go do that before completing the Jumpstart series. Our Van Jumpstart journey is comprised of really three different Jumpstart sessions: Jumpstart 1, 2, and 3. In Jumpstart 1, we're really trying to understand what are those ideas to action, what are those supply chain components that are really limiting our ability to advance our implementation of our van. So Jumpstart 1 is going to really understand what are those components and what are those ideas to action to improve the constraints that are currently in our supply chain. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a reflection on what is a van. So early on in the workshop, you heard about the van, you heard about the definition of the van, you heard of some success stories. So what we'd like to do now is to have some time of reflection back on your understanding and what the van means to you and your supply chain. So pause the video now and spend about 5 minutes doing that reflection within your teams. Welcome back, and thank you for spending time doing that reflection on what is a van. As we get into Jumpstart 1, the key of this session is to identify where your specific van is to determine the current state for the van-specific supply chain components. At the conclusion of this session, you will have ideas to action based on the current state of your supply chain that you will use through Jumpstart 2 and Jumpstart 3. As you can see from our visual, our framework is set on a foundation of Van 1.0 blueprint. And we started this workshop series with success stories. The success stories, as you recall, are how are other countries implementing their van? What are the successes? What are the tools other countries used to implement a van? Now that we have that knowledge, we're going to then go to country-specific vans through our Jumpstart 1 series and determine that current state. Then you'll spend some time through solution seminars to gain knowledge and best practices and use of tools to help improve your supply chain. You will then spend time in Jumpstart 2 to develop those ideas to action that you came up with in Jumpstart 1. You will then transition into Jumpstart 3, which is creating your van-specific roadmap that you will use to execute and accelerate your van implementation journey. Supply chains are ecosystems comprised of interdependent components functioning as an end-to-end system. You can see the 20 components that we have listed here. These 20 components are the same components that make up a supply chain for private sector companies and also public health supply chains. And optimizing for one component independent of the impacts to the system can and will result in suboptimization, as you learned through the Global Health Supply Chain Maturity Model session. And as we mentioned, a prerequisite for Jumpstart 1 is to review that session. So if you haven't done that, please pause the video and complete that course. And in that session, you learned about the value of managing the supply chain as an end-to-end system and approaching improvement initiatives from a theory of constraints perspective. While these 20 supply chain components are standard, each geography's supply chain is unique within those components and requires a specific roadmap for improvement. The supply chain components and improvement tools are standard across geographies, but the roadmap is not. These 4 components make up the Global Health Supply Chain Maturity Model, and we'll do a quick summary based on that session. We have a critical few supply chain components that are our inputs that really drive supply chain performance, or the outputs. And these supply chain components that make up the supply chain ecosystem sit within a market, and those markets can impact supply chain performance. Number 2, the supply chain maturity model is based on a set of yes/no capability questions that establish your maturity level by each of these components. And your lowest level of maturity drives the overall system maturity. And number 3, the maturity level is determined by that least mature component. And you can see here we have 5 levels, from canvas to bronze, silver, gold, and then to graduation. So as you mature to graduation. And number 4, the potential value that you learned is that one, it can be used for a framework for investment. And number two, donor coordination. So when you complete the maturity model, that gives you a communication tool as you're working with donors and implementation providers on what type of projects should we be implementing to really target our lowest mature component. Most importantly, this tool provides country ownership. Countries can administer this tool and can complete this tool in a matter of hours, and really gives countries a voice in talking with donors and implementation providers on what projects should be implemented and funded to improve the overall supply chain. This is our maturity model, and you can see it is based in Excel. And along the left side of the spreadsheet in column B, we have the 20 supply chain components. And then across the top, we have the maturity levels. And you'll see we have the yes/no capability questions for each component and for each maturity level. So we'll walk through one example. This example is service delivery point or facility level visibility. And the first question that you'll see is there some visibility to inventory and consumption at some of the facilities? So around 20% or less. If the answer to that is yes, you will select yes and go to the next set of questions, which would represent our silver level. Do you have visibility to inventory and consumption at most facilities on a bi-monthly basis, saying around 80%? If the answer is no, then you would drop down and select no and go to the next question. Is there some information provided to facilities about warehouse inventory, upcoming shipments, health programs, etc.? If the answer to that is yes, then you would drop down and select yes. And as you can see now from this component, if you had one no, you would stop at that point because your maturity model is now set for that component. You would then complete the maturity model for all 20 components, and then your output will be displayed on the second tab labeled output. And this is a maturity model output with fictitious data. So you'll see, based on the first component that we use as an example, facility level visibility, you'll see your bronze level, your silver level, your gold level, and your graduation level. For the bronze question, we answered yes. So the output shaded the cells blue, saying you are bronze for your facility level visibility. We then went to silver, and we had yes on one question and no on the other question. So you can see here that the tool populated one cell with blue. So for facility level visibility, based on your answers, the output was that you are a bronze level supply chain and approaching silver. So for this example, for facility level visibility, since you're not silver, you would default to bronze. And you can see here the output is for all 20 components. And based on the theory of constraints that you learned when you viewed the Global Health Supply Chain Maturity Model session, that the least mature component drives overall performance. So in our example, transportation would be the lowest component, and that would be where you would want to focus your investments. Now, we talked about the 20 supply chain components. Those 20 supply chain components that you see here, again, are components that make up an end-to-end supply chain. But in the Jumpstart sessions, we want to focus on only the van-specific supply chain components, and you can see those highlighted here. They are performance management and governance, warehouse order management and visibility, facility level visibility, order management, inventory management, and analysis and evaluation. We also strongly encourage that you go back and fully complete the maturity model to ensure that the identified improvement ideas are not resulting in sub-optimization. So the Jumpstart series will focus on these components, but we encourage you to go back and complete the full model. We are now ready to begin the Jumpstart number 1 exercise. So your instructions are to turn in your workbook to the Jumpstart 1 session and then break into smaller groups. In your groups, complete the maturity model for the van-specific components. And as a reminder, those components are performance management and governance, warehouse order management and visibility, facility level visibility, order management, inventory management, and analysis and evaluation. And you will determine what is the least mature component. You will then nominate one person to share what the group has learned at the end of the Jumpstart. And you want to record the ideas to action in your workbook. These ideas will then be developed in the next Jumpstart 2, and Jumpstart 3 sessions. You'll notice in your workbook that you have a series of worksheets. For each van-specific supply chain component, you'll notice it has a worksheet. When you complete the maturity model, as an example, if performance management was your least mature area for the van-specific components, you would turn to this worksheet and complete this for performance management. And you'll notice this matrix contains a series of questions that will help guide the discussion and take your component, in this case performance management, and formulate an idea to action. So as an example, the questions across the top will help guide the discussion. They are, is there a clear definition of success for each process and area of the supply chain? You would then answer that question based on the left-hand side components, which are from a process and policy standpoint. What should be happening today? You would document that in the cell. The next question is, what is actually happening today? So we may have a policy and we may have a process, but what is actually happening at the facility level? Then from a people standpoint, who are the people that are doing that work? And what is the supportive technology? And then what are those challenges that you need to overcome? So you'll complete those series of questions based on the components that you see along the left side, and that will help refine the component to ideas to action that you can then take into later Jumpstart series. So what we want to do now is pause the video and complete this worksheet for your least mature supply chain component from a van standpoint. Welcome back. We will now wrap up our Jumpstart number 1 series. You have now evaluated your supply chain on key components of a van and have identified the ideas to action towards stronger data-driven decision-making. You will now be spending the next 3 sessions exploring deep dives in the following areas: performance management, failure is not an option; continuous improvement to unlock your supply chain's full potential; empower teams manage powerful supply chains; and the value of having data as fuel for your supply chain. So prerequisites prior to starting Jumpstart 2 and Jumpstart 3 will be to view these solution seminars in preparation for taking your ideas to action. And then in Jumpstart 3, you will be creating your roadmap that you will then use to accelerate the implementation of your van. Thank you.